So welcome everybody, I hope you're all well. And before we get started and do a few introductions, I just want to run through a couple of housekeeping things, if that's okay. So firstly, you may have noticed I've just switched on record. So I will be recording this session, and I like to do that because it allows me to then share it with other people, because what I like to do is give people value, and one way of doing that is to share workshops like this with other people. So as long as everybody's happy for me to record this, that's great. If, however, you decide afterwards that you don't want to appear on here, then please drop me an email or contact me however you want to, and I'll be more than happy to sort of take you off the video. I've got some fancy editing equipment that will allow me to take you off, but hopefully you'll all be happy to be recorded. So that's great. Secondly, just congratulate yourself for being here, because I know we've all got busy lives, especially as we're now starting to come out of lockdown and life's starting to return to normal. That I know my diary is definitely getting busier, which is good. So I'm sure yours is as well. So thank you for taking the time to be here this evening, and just congratulate yourself for being here. And it's also a sign that you're committed to making change, because there are two things that need to happen if you want to make change in your life. One I've just mentioned, which is making commitments, and the secondly is also taking action, which is what you've all done to be here this evening. Okay, just say hi to Judith. I hope you're well.
Hi, Shuna. Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Very long time since I've seen you.
Not great, which is why I'm leaving. So that's why I'm on this webinar tonight as well. So yes.
Okay, maybe we'll chat about that another time then.
Yeah, probably best.
Okay, so 3 things that I just want to kind of run by you. So one is, if possible, please can you stay until the end? If I know everybody's got busy lives, so if you do need to jump off at any point, that's fine. I will, as I said, I'm recording this, so I will send a copy out to everybody who's attended or who even registered. And if you are able to stay to the end, you're more than welcome to come back on one of the workshops that I run in the future. I'm running these at the moment on a monthly basis. Towards the end of the summer, I'm going to actually run them twice a month, but for now they'll be monthly. Secondly is to be coachable. As I mentioned before, most of you are probably here because you want to make some kind of change in your life. So I'll be running some exercises and asking you questions. So please, where you can and you want to, be involved. And part of this, I'm sure, is that maybe you're feeling a bit stuck where you are, or you want to make the changes to step out of your comfort zone. So one of those things that you could start to do to step outside of your comfort zone is to take part, and maybe if you're not used to speaking up on things like this, to sort of challenge yourself to do that. And lastly, just be present. So if possible, if you're happy to switch your cameras on, I know Kanchana's already mentioned that it's a bit difficult for you at the moment, so that's fine. But if anybody else is happy to switch their cameras on, that would be great, because I much prefer talking to people's faces. I want to see all your lovely faces. And thank you, Judith. And if you're worried about a mess in the background, or the dog's chewing biscuits in the background, or there's washing hanging up, whatever's going on, don't worry about that. I'm much more interested in seeing your faces than what's going on behind you. Okay, good. So that's just all the housekeeping-y stuff. One last thing, just to reassure you, I'm not here to sell you anything tonight. I'm not here to sell you any programs or products. I know I've been to a lot of these kind of things where people spend half of their time trying to flog you something. That's not what I'm here to do. So tonight's all about me giving you value. I will at the end, if anybody's interested in having another conversation with me or taking the conversation a bit further, I will be talking, or give you an opportunity to do that. I'll share a link with you where you can book a session with me. So if you're interested in that, I'll talk to you about it at the very, very end. But for now, you can just sort of sit back and relax and know that I'm just going to give you some value on how you can find your confidence. Okay? So just to give you a little bit of background in what helped me decide to sort of run this particular workshop with that subject, is just to tell you a story of what happened to me earlier on in my life and how I got to where I am now. So this is all about finding your confidence by taking back your power. And very, very long time ago, which is probably scarily about 25 years ago, when I was a married woman, no longer, I went into the marriage with not very much confidence in the first place, but the relationship actually deteriorated that further, to the point where I have a very vivid memory of an incident that happened where I was stood in a car park with my ex-husband, just talking to a guy who was running an event, and I think we were just talking to him about the event, and the guy actually turned to me and asked me a question, and it was just a simple question, nothing earth-shattering, But I can clearly remember that I looked and turned to my husband to answer the question for me. And I had one of those moments where, you kind of leave your body and you're looking at yourself, wondering what's happened. And I couldn't understand how I'd got to the point where I'd lost all the ability to even speak and answer a question for myself. And I was expecting and relying on my husband to do it for me. And after that marriage ended, I spent a long time sort of blaming him for destroying my confidence further and taking that away from me. And it's only with the work that I've been doing in the last few years, I've been doing some training and had some coaching around mindset, that I realised that it wasn't something he took from me, because you can't take something from somebody without them giving you permission. So somewhere along the way, I allowed him to take my confidence away from me. So this session tonight is all about giving you some tools on how you can empower yourself to take your confidence back if that's something you're struggling with. Okay, does that sound good? Okay, so before we actually get into the workshop, I'm just going to give you a chance to introduce yourselves to each other. So hopefully, because we all live in the world of Zoom these days, so hopefully you're all familiar with breakout rooms. Has everybody been in one of those before? Yeah, hopefully. So I'm just going to split you up into groups so you can just introduce yourselves to each other. So if you just say who you are, where you're from, and what you're hoping to get out of tonight's workshop, I will give you an opportunity to do that, and I'll give you probably about 5 minutes. So that should give you, how many of you are there? 7. So I'll do 2 groups of 2 and a group of 3. So I'll give you about 5 minutes just to introduce yourselves to each other. Okay, so bear with me while I sort out the breakout rooms. Okay, and I will see you in about 5 minutes then. So you might need to press a button just to join the room. Okay. Just give everybody a moment. There's still one. Oh, there you are. I was thinking there's some people missing there, but that's good. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so how was that? Is anybody happy to share what they'd like to get out of tonight's workshop?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mind waiting. I was just going to say that I'd like to take more control on things that I feel that I have no control of. And also I find that I rabbit too much when I don't know what I'm, and people aren't like engaging, like I was having a conversation with Daniela. If you don't know that they engage with what you're saying, I tend to rabbit too much.
Yeah,
just to get a nod or something. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll see if we can do something to address that tonight then. Sorry, Ginger, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I had just kind of found myself a little stuck in life, in my career and in my personal life a little bit. And so I was just hoping to learn some tools and like strategies to kind of help, continue on the process of trying to get unstuck.
Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, we'll definitely do that for you. Thanks for sharing that. Okay then, so before we get on to any tips and strategies, it's probably a good idea to understand what confidence actually is. So is anybody happy to share or have a go at what they think confidence is, the definition of it, or what it means to them?
So I suppose one thing is about having a belief in your abilities, knowing who you are.
Yeah,
lots more stuff.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks for that, Daniela. Anybody else got anything they want to share?
I think it's the same thing. It's about having conviction, that belief that actually the choices that you make, the things that you say, you're happy with that. I think that's often what confidence means to me, is that, and not necessarily being swayed by other people, saying this is what I believe, this is what I think. It might not fit in with your thoughts, but this is, and you feel happy and content with that. That's kind of what it means to me.
Yeah, okay, great. And thanks for sharing that. And welcome, Gerhild. I hope I'm pronouncing that okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So yeah, absolutely right, both Sean and Daniela. So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to make the distinction because quite often when some clients come to me and they want to be more confident, they kind of think that confidence in itself is a thing. but it's more, as Sian and Daniela have quite rightly pointed out, it's more about the beliefs and that conviction that you've got in yourself. Because if you think of confidence as actually a behaviour, it's what's behind that behaviour that will cause you to either not have confidence or have confidence. So there's a definition that I found that kind of sums it up nicely. It's a feeling of self-assurance arising from an appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities, which is pretty much what Daniela and Sian just said quite correctly. Okay, so thank you for that. So I just want you to have a think about what being confident means and what it means to you. So if I were to ask you to be confident, what would you need to do? So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to write down what you'd need to do if you were going to be confident. Hi Melody, I've just seen your message, so yeah, I appreciate if your internet's a little bit dodgy, but if you can just join in when you can, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, so has everybody got something written down? Yep. Anybody happy to share for what they've got written down, that if they were going to be confident, what they'd do?
I came up with 3 C's. I would be calm, I would be clear, and I'd be controlled.
Great, brilliant. That's fantastic. And I like that. I may nick that actually. Anybody else got anything they'd like to share?
I just put research. I'm going to research everything to make sure I had enough information to discuss things and feel happy to discuss things. And just take notes and agree to get back to people if I'm not 100% sure on things that they say, but feel confident enough to say I'm not overly familiar with that.
Yeah.
I'll have to come back to you at some point.
Yeah, brilliant. Good stuff. Great. Anything else? No. Okay. No. Cool. So who would like to hear? I've got 3 strategies for you tonight. So who would like to hear about some tools and techniques and strategies and approaches that will help you find your confidence again? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So the first one we're going to discuss is people pleasing. So how to stop people pleasing. So is anybody here that familiar to anybody that they're a bit guilty of people pleasing or not being able to say no to people? I know that's something I used to struggle with. So what do I mean by people pleasing for a start, just to make sure we're on the same page? And thanks for that. So it's when we're doing or saying things to please other people, and it's not necessarily things that give us what we want or get us what we want out of life. And it can be at the expense of your happiness or even your well-being. So it's quite a common issue that I've come across with working with people, and there's quite a few digital techniques that we can use to actually get over that as well. So has anybody got any idea of different ways or different reasons that we can actually people please? Because there's a few different reasons. So it might be some things that you do that you do that cause you to people please or not be able to say no to people.
I think for me it's more, although I have got better, but I think it's more about, well, if I do that for them, they will eventually come round to see my way of thinking or want or also sort of do something for me. I don't mean that in a sort of selfish way, but if, for example, if I agree to meet somebody, I don't cancel.
Yeah.
And even if it's difficult for me, I still don't cancel because we've arranged it. But other people don't do that, and I just think, well, it's that sort of, I've gone out my way, even if something does happen, I always try and make a commitment, and I think not everybody does that.
Yeah.
And I think, and they're comfortable about breaking a commitment, and I think, well, maybe I should be a bit more like that But I feel I go out of my way to help people, and I don't necessarily think it's reciprocated. I can only really think of one friend that I have that would do the same for me.
Okay.
So I think that's where I feel about people pleasing, and I need to stop and just feel comfortable that actually.
Or it could be that there's just some action you could take to actually let people know how you feel. And
yes.
It's whether you actually kind of let people know that that's not acceptable. And we'll be talking a little bit more about how you can do that. Okay, cool. Anybody else got any ideas of what people pleasing means or what it means to them?
Yeah, I think for me, at least growing up, it was easier to people please and just kind of go along with, whatever my mom sort of wanted. But I think also it was just easier than to try to fight for my own voice, just to suck it up and do it her way, whatever it was. But I think out of that, like it feels good. There's a momentary good feeling of making someone else happy, or feeling like you made someone else happy, but long term it's not good. I know that, but it's just kind of this like satisfaction of I sacrificed something, or I laid something down for someone else to go along with what they wanted. But then I'm starting to find out later I'm resentful of that.
Yeah, and that's where the problems start, is if it's making you unhappy, that's can cause the problems, similar to what Sian was saying. And also, if it is something that you started doing in childhood, it can then become a behaviour and a habit and start doing it later on in life as well. But thank you both for sharing. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment to just show you a few more ideas. So hopefully everybody can see that okay. So just a few other reasons that we might people please. So this is something that Ginger actually raised, that it can be to avoid conflict, that we don't like to upset people, or we're worried if we might make them angry if we don't go along with what they say. So that can be a reason that we don't say no, or we people please. Again, as Ginger also mentioned, it can be learnt as a role in childhood, that just to keep the peace, that we went along with what our parents wanted, or we think we were doing the best thing by doing what our parents wanted, and then we just learn that as a behaviour and it carries on into adulthood. And again, something else, Ginger covered quite a few of these, so thank you. It can be part of our self-worth is tied up in helping others, so you might get some satisfaction out of helping other people, which is great. But when that becomes a problem for you and you're doing far too much for other people and not getting anything in return, or you're giving out too much energy, that's when it can become a problem. We could do it to receive praise. That can be tied into, if you're not feeling particularly confident, you might need to get praise from people, so that might be another reason you do it. We've not figured out our boundaries, so I'm going to be talking a lot more about boundaries shortly, so I'll come back to that one in a moment. And another one that I think some of us can be guilty of is that we always want to help others, but we're not very good at accepting or asking for help ourselves. So I know that's something I used to be guilty of, and it took me a long time to learn how to ask for help, but I was more than happy to help everybody else. So do those kind of resonate with people, those reasons? Yeah, I thought so. Oh. I've lost the bit too. Oh, there we go. Right. Sorry, get confused by the technology sometimes, which shouldn't happen because I used to work in IT. So the other bit that isn't included on that slide, I do need to update it, is that we can people please just to live up to other people's expectations. So we might just want to please other people. If other people have got beliefs or a set of expectations, it can happen with our parents. It could be our work colleagues, our bosses, that kind of thing. And again, if it's things that you're saying yes to, or you're just pleasing people to keep other people happy, then that's obviously in the long run not going to make you happy. All right. So there was a client that I had last year, and just to give you an example of where somebody's living up to other people's expectations, she came to me because she was struggling to find a relationship. And one of the things that we found, she was in her late 30s, is that she was very worried about what her parents would think of somebody she chose as a partner. So she went on lots of dates, but they didn't kind of progress to relationships. And she was kind of filtering her choice of partner through what her parents would expect. One of which I can remember was that they very much disapproved of her being involved with somebody who was divorced, who'd been married before. So automatically, as you can imagine, at the age of 38, that she was ruling out quite a large part of the male population, because by then quite a lot of people have been married. But she'd met a lot of nice people, but because they were married, that she was just dismissing them. So you can start to see how people fall into a pattern of living up to other people's expectations just to keep them happy. But as a result, she was making herself very unhappy. Does that make sense? Okay. So does anybody find it difficult to say no as well? Because I know I used to have that issue. And sometimes that's okay to say yes to things. So I'm not saying you have to say no to everything. So sometimes it's okay to say yes to things, and some people get joy out of helping others and doing good things for others, and that's fine. And I'm not saying stop doing that. What you might want to start asking yourself is, are you doing that at the expense of your own happiness and your own well-being? Because that's when it's going to start causing a problem. So what I often advise my client, or talk to my clients about doing, is I want to get you to a position where all relationships and interactions that you have are a win-win for everybody. Because if you're people pleasing and always saying yes to people, and you're doing that too often and to your detriment, you're going to end up on the losing side of that situation, and everybody else will be winning. So to get you to that point, you need to start to establish what your boundaries are. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about where your boundaries are. But there are ways of doing it. So even though you're saying no to people, there are nice ways you can do it. And you don't have to say no every time, but it's just about learning how to find your voice and what to say to people to ensure that you keep yourself safe and happy, and other people are still happy as well. Okay. So does everybody understand what I mean about when I talk about boundaries? Or is that a no? Okay. So the best analogy I can give is when talking about property. So if I was to ask you how you knew somebody was on your property, how would you know somebody'd stepped onto your property? Anybody got an answer?
You would see it, or you might see a mark that they'd left, or
yeah. So you'd see where they were. And what is it that defines your property?
the boundary around it.
Yeah, basically. So everybody's property's got a boundary. So there's a line that people would have to cross to get onto your property. So that's pretty much, in a very basic terms, what I'm talking about with our personal boundaries. So there's a line that you draw around yourself, a metaphysical line around yourself. And if anybody crosses that line, that's how you know that someone has crossed your boundary. So we'll talk in a second about how to define your boundaries. And basically what your boundaries will be is how you want people to treat you. And it's as simple as that. So when people talk about crossing boundaries, that's just where they've stepped over that line of how you want people to treat you. So one main one that most people have when they start thinking about the boundaries that the way they want people to treat them is with respect. So if people don't treat you with respect, that means they've crossed that line and that boundary of how you want to be treated. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So there's a quote that I quite like, which I think resonates with a lot of people when they start thinking about boundaries. And I think Danielle is probably going to be familiar with this one from conversations we've had before. So the only people who get upset by you setting boundaries are the ones who are benefiting from you having none. So I'm sure we've probably all had those people in our lives that just to keep expecting to take from us and just keep taking and taking and taking without us putting up any objection or any fight about it. And if you start pushing back and not complying with what those people want or what they're expecting of you, you might get a bit of resistance from them, and it's just because they're used to getting their own way. And for you to start sort of taking your confidence back, that's when you need to start being a little bit tougher on those boundaries and making sure that you're getting what you want out of situations and conversations. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, good. So like I said, so your boundaries are how you want people to treat you. So I'm just going to give you a little exercise to do. And I'm actually just going to ask you to write a list of how you want people to treat you. As simple as that. So I'm going to give you, you might be done before this time, but I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. And then we'll have a quick chat about it afterwards. So I've given you one that you might want to add to your list already, that is usually a common one, which is that you might want to be treated with respect. But then just have a think about anything else that springs to mind about how you want people to treat you. Everybody clear on that? Yeah, okay. So I'll give you 5 minutes and I'll just stick on a little bit of music so that you can just write that list and off you go. So has everybody got something, or do you need a little bit longer? You okay? Yeah, okay, great. So is anybody happy to share what they've got on their list?
So I mean, first one was definitely about respect, then give me the space I need. And so that's both from a thinking time point of view and reflection, but as well as that personal, physical space, not sort of treading into that zone, to really listen, to be kind, various things like that.
Great, all good stuff. And do you feel that there's any of those areas that are a bit of a struggle, or do you think those are works in progress at the moment?
It's in progress, yeah.
Amanda, did you want to share? Thanks, Daniela.
Yeah, I started with respect, and also put equally. I would like to be treated equally, not as if I wasn't. Consideration as well. I don't mind constructive feedback, but I think you should be considerate when you're actually telling people whether you agree with them or not, but without prejudice as well. I suppose that comes under equally, and also patience. But it's really hard to define it, isn't it, when you're thinking about it?
Yeah. And this is something you can kind of do a bit more work on after the session as well, but it was just to kind of get you thinking about it. So thanks for sharing, Amanda. Anybody else? Judith, did you want to share?
Not to be talked down to as well, I think. You know, I've been in situations quite recently where just being patronised, you know, about things that they know that I know, but the way I've been spoken to, it's like I've just suddenly joined the company. I've been there for years, you know, and things like that. So it's not to be patronised and not to be spoken down to.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these things that you find on your list as well, they might overlap slightly, so that kind of feeds into respect a bit as well, but a bit more. So there's always themes going through all of these. So thanks for that, Judith. And Sian, did you want to?
I think just really what everybody's said. I suppose I was thinking more sort of that idea of affection and compassion. So I think, you know, sometimes people don't speak to each other considering that it's another person there and that we've got the same feelings. That idea of if somebody engages with you, that they're understanding and they're also treating you with friendship. You know, if you're engaging with somebody, then even if they disagree with you, it seems to become quite personal. And I think the thing that struck me was what Daniela said about personal space. It's that personal space is also your emotions seem to fill in that space. So when somebody kind of encroaches on it, and you know, when Judith said about the not talked down to or being patronised, it just suddenly I kind of thought of myself of having that space around. And then when people behave like that, it's almost like it's coming into that personal space, even if they're not there. Does that make sense? You know, it's when somebody's really unkind to you and they could be standing quite a distance away, but the sense, the way that they've made you feel kind of comes into that space, doesn't it? I don't know if anybody else feels like that.
Yeah, absolutely, because emotions do carry energy. So yes, it will kind of fill up the space around you. Absolutely. Great, thanks for that. So before we sort of delve into boundaries a little bit more, I'm going to put you into another breakout room. So there's now 8 of you, so I'll put you into 4 groups of 2, and it's just to have a look down your list and think if there's one that in particular is you don't feel people are treating you that way at the moment, or it's one that seems a particular problem for you. Just talk about that one and kind of how it's affecting you at the moment. Just have a brief discussion if you're happy to do that. So I will give you about 6 minutes, so you've got 3 minutes to each to talk about that, and like I said, I'll put you into groups of 2. So is everybody clear on what they need to do? So it's just identifying one thing off that list that's a particular problem, and then just discuss sort of briefly how that's affecting you at the moment. Okay? And then we'll talk a bit more about boundaries afterwards. Right, just bear with me. Okay, so I will pop you into rooms then, so I'll see you shortly in about 6 minutes. I think realise it's even more of a challenge the last year or so, because we've been working from home so much that interactions haven't been face to face, and you can't kind of get people in the same room at the same time, and being on Zoom isn't the same. So I think challenges like this have been exacerbated even more because you can't
absolutely
people face to face. So if you were to handle it, so if you were to go back and do things differently, Judith, how do you think you might handle it differently? Or do you think you could handle it differently?
Yeah, I'd have probably have had to been a little bit more confrontational rather than, you know, agreeing to everything, people pleasing, whatever. I think, you know, I should have said, look, you know, no, I can't do this then, and I'll do it on such and such a time, and you know, just things like that. But even now, it's hard for me to think back. What would I actually do now? I don't know. I don't know. When you don't have much support either within that workplace from any of the other senior people, it's quite difficult to do something when it's a senior person who's doing this.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. I probably should have just said, look, you know, it's not acceptable, this level of harassment, but you know, whatever it was, I don't know. It's hard to put a word to it as well as to what it actually was. It was control, I think. It was absolute control. Okay. And I should have done something about it, but yeah, I probably just called it out for what it was.
Yeah. So would you mind me asking you a few more questions about this, just to dig a little? So if you weren't feeling confident enough to speak up, what do you think was behind that, and what was stopping you from speaking up?
I thought I would make things worse, perhaps, if I spoke up, and the person involved was quite domineering as well, and whenever I did say something back, it would always be, well, you've got to do it like that, or that's the way it is, or if I say I want it doing now, then I want it doing now, sort of thing. It was those sorts of things, and I didn't know how to come back at him, you know, really, to do anything about it, because I'd never been in that situation before, really. So it was uncharted territory, really. So yeah, I didn't really know what to do about it.
Okay.
And when I did speak to other people about it, they were like, oh, well, you know, yeah, well, that's what he's like, sort of thing. You know, it'll pass, you know, well, I've been in that situation and stuff like that. But, you know, I don't think anybody was really fully aware of what was going on. And it was only when I've done my exit interview that I think they've realised now that, you know, there are issues there. But yeah, I'm not really sure what I would do. Maybe I should have just been stronger and just said, look, you know, no more, you know.
So in normal situations, would you be confident enough to speak up for yourself?
Outside of work?
Yeah, or even in a similar situation in work?
Yeah, definitely.
It's more this one individual rather than...
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so has anybody got any more questions about enforcing boundaries, or is that giving you something to take away and put into practice? Did you say so? That's all right. I saw your lips move, Daniela. I'm not sure what you were saying. No, you're okay. All right. Okay. Shall I move on then? Yeah. Okay. So the next area to talk about is stories that we can tell ourselves. Because whether you realise it or not, we tell ourselves all sorts of stories about all sorts of things, and they can have an unconscious sort of influence on what we do. And if we tell ourselves those stories often enough and for long enough, they can actually form beliefs. And when we have beliefs about those things, they can then sort of run unconsciously in the background. So it's a bit like a software program running in the background, and all of our behaviours and actions kind of fall out of that belief. That makes sense. And then to compound that, because we always like to be right. So we like to be right in everything that we do. I'm sure you'll agree. So by being right, it also means that we're then looking for evidence to prove ourselves right. So, for example, I used to have a belief and I used to tell myself that people didn't listen to me. So similar to what somebody else was saying. I can't remember who it was earlier. Was it you, Sean? I can't remember. Or Amanda?
Danielle.
Danielle,
Daniela, sorry.
Daniela, sorry. Yes, I knew somebody did. So I used to tell myself that nobody would listen to me and I wasn't important. And that kind of ran in the background all the time. So I'd then start to prove myself right. I'd start to look for evidence for that. So I used to have a massive fear of public speaking. And so, as you can imagine, if I had a belief that I wasn't important and people didn't listen to me, that's going to have a massive effect on me speaking in public, on top of all the self-esteem issues and lack of belief I had in myself as well. So I was constantly then, if I was speaking to anybody and I got the slightest hint that they weren't listening to me, I'd just shut down and I'd go into kind of a meltdown mode. I'd stop speaking. I'd just get myself into a real pickle about speaking to people if I had the slightest inkling they weren't listening to me. So, and this caused me to have problems in work, in relationships, anywhere really, that I just thought people weren't listening to me. And it was just because I was looking for evidence, and the more evidence I found, the worse it got. So I don't know if this is sort of resonating with anybody about any beliefs they might hold about themselves, and they can start to become a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you're going around with this belief and looking for evidence, it just becomes part of your everyday life, and you just think, well, I was right, so I may as well just give up. That makes sense? Yeah. Okay. So they don't even necessarily need to be stories that we tell ourselves, because they can even be other people's stories. And we can adopt those as beliefs of our own. So, for example, if another example from me as well, my mum is a born worrier. She gets anxious about absolutely everything. And as children, we tend to model our parents' behaviours. So because she constantly got this thing going on that imagine the worst of everything that was going to happen, I also adopted that as a way of being as well. So I grew up with her story that I had to be anxious about everything because that's all I knew. And that's what I'd modelled as a child. So we can adopt what our parents believe as well. So it could also be that we're worried about people judging us or what people might think about us. So there's all sorts of stories that we can be telling ourselves. So I just want you to start asking yourself, what story are you telling yourself that might be holding you back in life? So like I mentioned, it could be that you're worried about people judging you, or you might think that you're not good enough, or that you're not good at something in particular, or not good at public speaking, for example, or not good at learning a language or playing a sport. You could be that I think that I don't deserve good things in life, or that I can't do something, or that I'm too something or other, too thin, too big, too not smart enough. There could be all sorts of things that we're telling ourselves. So I'm just going to give you another exercise to do to have a think about what those things might be. So just write down a couple of, might just be one or two things of stories that you're telling yourself, and just think about those stories and how they might be holding you back in life as well. Okay, that makes sense? Everybody okay with that? All right. So I'll give you, just stick a track on again. So I'll give you about 3 minutes to do that. Just have a think about the stories that you're telling yourself that are holding you back. Okay, everybody got something? Okay. Oop. Hang on, music's carried on. Bear with me a second. Oh. Sorry, technology's taking over. Sorry. So has everybody got something? Is anybody happy to share what they've written down of what they might be telling themselves?
I didn't need to write mine down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was actually just telling Ginger that I think I people please because I'm inadequate. Okay. And I think they'll notice if I don't people please. So I didn't even need to write it down because I was just telling Ginger about it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, thanks for sharing that. And how's that been affecting you? How's that?
Quite a lot, really, because they paid for me to go and do an ISTQB exam for my job.
Okay, yeah.
So I went to take it, and everyone was there saying, "Oh, you know, you can do it, you can do it." And I was there with my manager, and I started to get feeling really ill, and my stomach started to play up, and my stomach was making funny noises, and I was in the exam getting even more self-conscious. And before I'd even finished half the questions, it completely ended on me, and I had to stand up and walk out. And I'm laughing now. It wasn't funny at the time. I don't even know why I'm laughing now. And then my manager passed, and I had to catch the train back with him from Leeds, feeling really bad. And then, because the problem was faulty equipment as well, they decided to pay for me to go and take this test again. So everyone was there watching me. Off I went to take this test again, and lo and behold, I failed again. So I was like so self-conscious the fact I failed it twice. And even my tutor kept saying, "You know this, Stan, you know it." So I booked half a day, and my husband turned up to meet me. And he said, "Come on, let's go. We'll go and spend the afternoon, and we won't even think about it." But no, unbeknownst to me, he booked for me to take this exam and paid for me to take this exam. So we went into town. I went into the think tank, and I took this exam, and I passed with flying colours.
Oh, wow. Well done.
And so when the pressure was off me, I could do it. But because I feel inadequate, and I know I do, I find it really hard to push forward. I can't explain it. I just can't.
Okay.
But yeah, it was difficult. But yeah, I don't know why I laugh about it now, because it wasn't funny at the time, catching that train back and knowing that I failed twice.
But
and having to admit that I failed twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But congratulations for passing. That's brilliant. And bless Mark for doing that for you.
Yeah, bless him.
And so would you mind if I
would you carry on?
Sort of having some help with that, just to see if we can delve a bit deeper? Okay. So has that feeling of being inadequate been there for a long time?
Yeah, possibly. And you know, so sometimes I think it's my fault, but now I'm starting to think, after listening to everybody else, perhaps it's not my fault. Perhaps it's not me thinking this. I don't know.
We'll find out, shall we?
Yeah.
So how far back do you think this feeling's been around, or this belief's been around?
I don't know, probably a long time. It's very hard to pinpoint it. If, like you say, you just have it for such a long time, it's like that comfortable feeling that you've always had. I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, that can be the problem sometimes. These beliefs go unconscious, that we just sort of don't realise we're acting from that belief sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you kind of cast your mind back to earlier on in life, is there any situation that pops into your mind that sort of relates to that, of where you might have started having that feeling or that thought?
I don't actually know. I can't, I suppose, I honestly don't know. I can't even pinpoint it myself, because I always try to come across as a confident person, even though inside I'm not as confident as I try to make out. I wonder if it's because we used to travel a lot as a child, and I had to make friends wherever I went. I've often thought this, you know, every so many months we'd pack up and we'd go and live somewhere else, or we'd pack up and go and live somewhere else. And again, I then used to have to talk to people and force myself to talk to people just to get a friend somewhere where we used to move.
Yeah. And how did that leave you feeling?
I don't know, because it's weird, because I was used to it. We'd always done it, every so often we pack up and go and live somewhere else, and we pack up and we go and live somewhere else. It was just the normal.
Yeah.
Really.
And quite often when I ask these questions, it's there'll be something that will pop back into your head. So if you have a think about, just sort of switch off from it for a moment. So if you, in a moment, cast your mind back to when you were a child and sort of moving around, was there any one particular incident or event that stands out that made you feel like you were inadequate?
No, I can't. Not that I'm aware of right now. No.
Okay.
But
Probably doesn't help that there's 7 of us looking at you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about things in my head that might have made me feel this way, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. So don't worry about that then. But so at the moment, that feeling of being inadequate, what kind of thing is it stopping you from doing?
A lot of things. I've been booked in for 2 more exams, and I keep thinking, oh God, more exams. I was supposed to take one before COVID came out,
Yeah.
And then it was put on hold. And then so I've been waiting a year. So I had my training for it over a year ago. So I was keep having to try fresh of all this agile stuff in my head ready. And then they've gone and now booked us onto another one, which is an advanced one, ICQB advanced. And I'm thinking, oh, here we go again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
yeah. So I've known you for over 6 years now.
yeah.
Doesn't time fly? And I've always considered you a very smart, intelligent lady. So I know that you're very, very capable of doing this stuff. And you've proved to yourself that you're capable of doing this stuff because you actually passed the exam.
Yeah. It's do you know what? That's another thing is I just remembered I never believed I could actually do this job. It was Judith that taught me into it.
Oh, was
It
it?
was Judith that helped me and believed in
Well
me.
done, Judith.
Yeah, it was my manager at the time who convinced me that the PDRS was worth making an effort for, put me through for my HND, which I passed, and convinced me to go for this job. And I can still say today she's one of the best managers I've ever had.
I think we all suffer a little bit from the
Yeah.
we're not good enough, don't we?
Yeah.
I think there's very few people who sort of waltz through life and think I'm great, I'm fantastic. I think we've all got a bit of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I certainly do, really. And I doubted that I can even type up a set of minutes in the last sort of few weeks. I really have. But I think now I'm trying to say that I think that's the way I've been made to feel rather than, that it's me.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right.
Yeah. So if you think about the fact that you're doing the job that Judith encouraged you to do, and you passed your HND, and you passed I can't remember the name of the exam, the one that you did.
ISTQB, yeah.
That one, yeah. That's too many letters for me. So does that prove that you are adequate?
Yeah, I've still got another 2 to do. It's still weighing on my head, I suppose.
So ignore that for now, but just based on the evidence of the past, you are smart, you are intelligent, and you are adequate.
Yeah.
So does it seem like, or can you see that that's just a story that you've been telling yourself, that you're not adequate?
Yeah, possibly. And sometimes I don't know if I, like you say, keep looking for evidence.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So if you dismiss that story of I'm not adequate, how would life be different if you let go of that story?
It'd probably be a lot easier. I'd probably be less stressed. I'd probably feel less anxious about things.
Yeah, that's good. So now that we've proved you are adequate and that life would be much better if you let go of that story, how did you feel about just letting go of that story and believing that you are adequate?
Yeah, I'd probably love to, especially as I've got 2 more exams coming up. I'd love to just feel that, I've already told my manager that when I take my exams, I'm not telling anybody, so I can take some of the pressure off myself. Probably make life easier for myself. I think that's the problem sometimes. It's just making life easier for yourself, really.
Yeah. And how about just believing that you are good enough and that you can do it instead?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Because you can choose to have that belief.
Yeah.
Does that seem? Do you think you can do that?
Yeah, I could try doing affirmations every morning as I look in the mirror.
Okay, I've just thought about something else that might help. So everybody's welcome to use this if you want to. So there's an audio that I've recorded, which is kind of visualization, meditation, stroke hypnosis thing. I think Daniela's used this before now, so Daniela can testify as to whether it helps or not. So that link I've just dropped into the chat box if you want to copy that and keep that somewhere. So that's if you've got an event coming up that you're not feeling particularly confident about or a little bit anxious about, it helps you visualize it turning out as you want it to. And I'll get Daniela to mention it, and if she's happy to, in a second, on how she got on with it. But I've used this, and I know other clients of mine have used this, and it actually really does help to put you in the right frame of mind when you've got something coming up. So I think it's only about 10 minutes long, I can't remember, so you can fit that in and listen to it as often as you need to or you want to. So are you happy to share anything about it, Daniela?
Yeah, it's probably nearer 20 actually. Yeah, but and I think that's right, because it really does take you step by step into deeper sort of state, which is really good. And the whole sort of breathing techniques, and I was amazed about how I could actually feel that in all the different parts of my body, that whole relaxation.
Mm-hmm.
And visualizing how you step into different rooms, and again, it's like you're stepping physically down, but it just generally has helped to really calm me and really put things into focus. So yeah, I would, and I was a bit like, oh, I don't know, I don't like going so deep. The first time I did it, I've said that to Shuna before. I was a bit like, oh, what if I don't come back out of this? Which was a bit of a silly thought, but I think I was almost trying to fight against it, if I'm being really honest about it, the first time round. But no, it's really, really nice, and Shuna's voice is lovely and calming as well on this.
Thank you.
Definitely, yeah, which does help.
Yeah, you don't want somebody shrieking when they're doing hypnosis stuff. So yeah.
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, give that a go, Amanda. Thank you for sharing that, Daniela.
That's fine.
And see if that helps. But also just be aware that. So do you acknowledge that thought of not being adequate's not true?
Yeah. The more I think about it, as we've been talking, and I'm listening to other people, I'm thinking, yeah, perhaps it's not me. Perhaps I'm not inadequate.
No, absolutely. So like I said earlier, that the first step is having an awareness about these things. So now that you're aware that story that you're telling yourself isn't true, you can start to do something about it. So you can think the opposite and start to tell yourself that you are adequate and you are good enough and that you can do these things, because you've already proved that you can.
Yeah.
And then have a listen to that track as well, leading up to the exams. Okay.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, good stuff. Right, so moving on to, so we've only got half an hour left. So moving on to the last strategy then. So this is about taking responsibility. And before I talk any further about what I mean by this, I want to give you quite a clear distinction. So I want to make the distinction between responsibility and blame, because they are two different things, and sometimes people can get a little bit confused about the two or mix them up a little bit. So responsibility is about being accountable for something and kind of stepping up and stepping into something and taking action. And blame is about finding fault or criticising. So I just want to sort of highlight that distinction before I talk any more about taking responsibility. And the problem with blame is it can keep you stuck, and responsibility kind of encourages you to take action. Okay, so just to make that clear. So I'm just going to share my screen again, if you bear with me a second. Okay. So can everybody see that okay? So this is sort of another step in how you take back your power. And so I've got the words responsible and victim up there. So when I talk about victim, I'm meaning that in the nicest possible way, with as much love as possible. So as I mentioned, when somebody's taking responsibility, they're taking action, they're being accountable and stepping up to doing something. And like I said, using the word victim in the nicest possible way, this is when you're a victim, you're basically, things are happening to you. Okay, so it's more about that, allowing things to happen to you. And so if you're allowing things to happen to you, so say in life things aren't going the way you want them to, and you're coming up with reasons and excuses as to why that hasn't happened, or you're blaming somebody else for it not happening. So it could be that if you say, for example, you didn't get the job that you wanted, you could come up with lots of reasons why you didn't get the job. You might say that they didn't ask you very good questions, or examples have gone out of my head now, or that, I don't know, the kids were playing around first thing in the morning, so that meant you were in a bad mood when you got there. Or anyway, just lots of reasons that you might be blaming for the reason you didn't get the job. Okay. Whereas if you were being a person in that situation and you were taking responsibility for things, you'd start to get the results that you want. So using that job example again, if you didn't get the job that you wanted, if you were taking responsibility for that, you would accept that you may not have answered the questions as well as you could have done. If the kids would put you in a bad mood in the morning, you'd take action to put yourself in the best possible mood before you went into the job. Or after the interview, if you didn't get the job, you would possibly seek out some feedback from the interviewers to find out how you could take some action to put things right for next time, or how you could do things better, or things that you needed to research, that kind of thing. So is that kind of helping you see the distinction between how you can take responsibility and moving away from being more of the victim where you're blaming things for going wrong? Does that make sense? Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. So we'll talk about this more in a second. But so if you're taking responsibility, you will start to see you're getting results in life. And when you start taking action and getting results, you'll start to feel more empowered rather than just letting things happen to you and blaming things for going wrong. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. So if you're quite happy being on that side of that equation I just showed of things just happening to you and you blaming everybody else in your life for things going wrong, that's absolutely fine. But it's more about if you're not getting the results that you want in life, then you obviously need to start doing something differently. So that's when you need to start taking action and taking responsibility. Okay. So there are 2 questions that I give all of my clients to ask themselves if they're feeling a bit stuck, or they're not sure what to do, or they're not quite sure how to move forward. So the 2 questions are, how can I make this happen, or how can I change this? So if you're not sure what to do, feeling a bit stuck or a bit grumpy with the world, if you ask yourself one of those 2 questions, whichever is appropriate, the answer to it will then give you the action or the steps that you then need to take to move forward, get unstuck, and be accountable.
Sorry, Sheena, what was the second question?
The first one was, how can I change this? And first question was, how can I make this happen? And the second one is, how can I change this?
Thank you.
So is that opening up anything for anybody? Or anybody got any questions or comments?
I think for me, I'm looking for a new position, and I've gone from getting interviews where I would have said there's a couple of interviews I haven't performed well, or I have been affected by the clear favouring of the internal candidate, which has had an impact on my performance. I think though it's lately I'm not getting shortlisted because they are going for cheaper options. So they're taking deputies. And I think for me it's not giving up, that I am being responsible. I am getting into the reasons why things are happening, because I'm trying to make sense of why I'm not being shortlisted when people that are being shortlisted haven't got the track record I've got. So it's really difficult to understand why. So I think I'm a bit stuck with how can I make this happen and how can I change this, because I can't change what I've done or who I am. That's kind of what I'm struggling with.
Yeah.
But I want to be responsible. And I think the only thing is that just not giving up and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it would be quite easy to sort of shrug your shoulders and think, oh, well, it's just pointless. But that's not going to change anything, is it, if you adopt that mindset? And it can be quite difficult, and it can be difficult, sorry. It can be quite easy to start comparing yourself to the other candidates, but it's not, that way isn't a very helpful way to go, because you never know what the interview panel's looking for. And it's whether there are people that you can ask around you as to if there's anything that you could do better, or anything you could research more, or anything.
I'm not getting any feedback.
Okay.
I mean, I actually got feedback that said that I did really well, and even when I asked about the questions, he couldn't pinpoint anything. They went for the known candidate. They went for who they know, somebody who was actually acting, or another one. They've gone for each time they've gone for somebody they know, and that's really hard to stay strong in that, isn't it? Because as you said, they've gone, you don't know what they're looking for. So it's quite difficult to know what to change when nobody can actually say, you didn't answer this well, you didn't do that well.
Yeah, and like you said, I think it does sound like to just keep going, which isn't always easy, but I know you are doing your best. And it also comes back to just putting your energy into the things that you can control. because other people's opinions and other people's decisions is something that we're not able to control. And sometimes it's just being able to, excuse me, I'm getting a bit of a frog in my throat. It is about letting go of knowing that there's a limit to what you have influence and control over, and just worrying and focusing all of your attention on what you can control. Because I think I have seen people expend an awful lot of energy in trying to take control of things that are out of their control and trying to understand things that they'll never get an answer to. So I know this isn't an easy answer or the answer that you want to hear, but it sounds like you're taking all the right action and doing all the right things, and it is just about being persistent.
Actually, that does help. Just sort of, I think that putting your energy into the things you can control.
Yeah.
Kind of what I'm working on. It is soul destroying. Sorry, I'm bringing the mood down, folks. Sorry.
No, do you know what, Sian? I completely with you. I've had same experiences. Some I know absolutely I've messed this interview up, so fine, move on from that. I've been in very similar situations to you on many occasions now. And somebody else said to me, somebody I really, really respect, she said, look, it's Daniela, it's a numbers game. It will happen.
Yeah.
You just have to keep going and be kind to yourself.
Yeah, it's being kind. I find that less easy.
Yeah.
And just on that note, I'm in the same situation as you as well.
Okay.
At the moment. And I have been doing a lot of self-reflective practice to see where I'm lacking, and I try not to blame myself. So I think it's just about your own wellness at the moment. It's my own wellness at the moment.
Yeah.
That's more important. But it's just about giving yourself a break, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Kanchana. Thank you for that, Kanchana. And as well, as Daniela said, it's about being kind to yourself, and it's a numbers game as well. And it's just knowing that when the right job will turn up, and that can be a bit disheartening when you're in the middle of it and it's been a long time, but yeah, fingers crossed. So it will happen, and just know the right job's out there for you. Because I know from a couple of conversations we've had, Sian, that on reflection, a couple of the jobs probably weren't the right ones for you as well, which doesn't really help, but it does help you see that had you got those jobs, it probably would have meant a step backwards rather than a step forwards.
Yeah, I think it is dodging a bullet sometimes. I think just something that Judith had said earlier about, I think you asked her what would she do, if she could have identified it earlier. But I think sometimes, no matter what you do, it's just you're in a situation where it's just not going to work. And I think I kind of struggle with the fact that you've got the skill set, you've got a proven track record, and you could make it work, and yet they appoint somebody who just takes it all apart, and you just think, what is your logic behind that? So I think sometimes, in fact all the time, that yourself you could do the job, but other people can't see it, so you've just got to walk away. And actually, no matter what you do, how good you are, how empathetic you are, how you try and work, or you work with people, it's just sometimes it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a negative way. I think that's quite strong. I think that can sometimes be quite powerful to be able to recognize that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, you don't know what other people are looking for, and you've got no control over their opinions or their decisions or their rationale for the decisions that they make. And it is tough, but it's just accepting that. And it's also to remember in interviews that it's as much about you checking them out as an employer as whether they're suitable and good enough for you as well. So we can get caught in that trap of thinking that we're the ones that need to perform and do our best, but equally I think some employers forget that they need to kind of put their best front on and try and attract you as an employee. So it works both ways. And I'm sure some of the people that have interviewed you probably looked at and thought, I really don't want to work here anyway. So it does work both ways. I think Daniela might have had an experience like that recently.
Yeah, and you know what? I was recently thinking back on our last conversation. So the last job I applied for, which was a 2-stage process,
yeah,
got amazingly got through the stakeholder process, which was over 20 odd people on Microsoft Teams questioning me to put me forward to the final panel. Get to the final panel, despite the fact I didn't think I'd performed sufficiently and I have arranged to get some proper feedback. Actually, it turned out they didn't appoint anybody. She changed her mind whilst doing the interviewing on what she wanted, was the reason I was given. And Sheena did ask me that, knowing what you know now, would you still want the job? And at the time I was going, well, yeah, because it is really good organisation, etc. And the job was really good for what I wanted. Since then, I thought about it and I thought, well, no, actually, probably not, no, because it's wasted not just my time, it's wasted so many people's time.
Definitely.
Yeah. So very kind of me to make them realise they wanted something different.
It was. You put them through that exercise, absolutely. Okay. Thank you all for sharing that. Okay. So I'm going to pop you into another breakout room. And so this time, have a think about a current situation. I think I know what Sean might pick, but think about a current situation where you feel a little bit stuck and ask yourself those two questions. And those two questions of how can I make this happen or how can I change this? And in fact, I won't put you into breakout rooms. I'll just get you to think about it on your own at the moment because we're just running out of time a little bit. So yeah, have a think about a situation where you're feeling a little bit stuck and ask yourself those two questions and see what action you can come up with to do things a bit differently. Okay, so I'll give you about 3 minutes to have a think about that, if that's all right. Does that make sense to everybody? I know I kind of rambled that a little bit, so off you go then. So think about a current situation where you're feeling a little bit stuck and ask yourself the questions, how can I make this happen or how can I change this? And see what you come up with of how you could do things a bit differently. Okay, has everybody got something? So has anybody got anything they're happy to share of the situation and what they might do differently? Now they've asked themselves those two questions. Has everybody found those two questions quite helpful to sort of open things up a little bit? Yeah. Anybody happy to share? Or not? Oh, Ginger, great.
Yes, I'll share.
Great.
Yeah, I want to spend some more time with these questions, but I think for me, my current situation, my company has recently gone through a merger and acquisition.
Okay.
And it's been a 5-year process. So I very much am in the space of trying to figure out what do I want to do in this last quarter of my career in terms of continuing to stay to see how things sort of shake out. I mean, we're through the acquisition, but the culture is pretty bad. Anyway, so I've already taken some action steps to start the job search to figure out what is my value actually worth, talking to my managers about what I think I want to do. And when I was thinking about how can I really change how can I change this? I can't necessarily change my job situation directly, like the culture. I have to like think about how I approach it. I've been a little bit passive in the process, and passive and patient, I think. But I'm really the one that has to make the change to decide, like, what do I actually want, and then just sort of go for it from there. So it was just kind of fun to reflect on, how can I make this happen? I've kind of started some of those steps, and it's felt really empowering to push on doors and apply for things and start having conversations with new companies, just to see what's out there. And even if I decide to stay where I currently am, I'll at least know kind of the market value of what I'm worth and sort of what's out there to explore.
That's good. And you're right, it is about empowering yourself. So it's by using those two questions, it's surprising what can open up to make you feel like you're back in control of things, and you can take charge of things and take action. So, yeah, good. I'm glad you found that. Great. Thank you for sharing that, Ginger. Okay. Anybody else got anything else they want to share? No. Okay. Great. Okay. So that's pretty much it. So just want to have a very quick share off a couple of you. So what would you say has been your biggest takeaway or insight from things we've talked about tonight, or the exercises that we've done? Just really briefly, if anybody's got anything.
I personally found it really useful. I've got to be honest. It made me think about things a lot more. Listening to other people's stories as well, I found that quite interesting. And you start to think, well, you're not the only person, you're not alone. Other people are feeling different pressures and everything. Yeah, so I found it very useful. And sometimes it's good to talk and think that there is a different way.
Yeah.
And it's not all you. It's not all you.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda.
No, thank you.
Anybody else? Daniela?
Sorry. I was just trying to find the clap thing.
Oh, I thought you put your hand up to speak. Sorry.
So yeah, no, I think absolutely. It always comes back to when you're sharing and you're listening and realizing you're not on your own. Is I completely agree with that, and just that whole reminder about absolutely we've got it in our own control to take that back. And I mean, we didn't use the word, but the whole thing about reframing. But I think it's always helpful when you are sharing and basically just being willing to ask for that help.
Yeah, that can be a huge step, is actually asking for that help. Yeah, definitely. Great. Thank you for that. Well, thank you very much, ladies. It's been a pleasure to be with you tonight. And I mentioned at the start that if anybody was interested to carry on the conversation and have a chat with me privately afterwards, then you can do. And I'm just going to pop a link in the chat box, which is a link to my diary to book in for an hour and a half session, which is completely complimentary. So feel free to book in a time that suits you. And the way I like to run those sessions is to find out what it is that you want in life or a specific area of your life, have a chat about what obstacles you're facing, and then during that call is to come up with some insights or some actions that you can take out of it. And then if you are interested in hearing anything about any of my programs, we can talk about that, or if you're not, that's absolutely fine as well. So that hour and a half is purely for you to use as you want to. And as I mentioned at the start, and as we've just talked about, sometimes it can be not so easy to sort of reach out and ask for help. So there's an offer there if you do want any, and also to challenge yourself if having any form of coaching is new to you, then that would give you a chance to sort of experience that one-to-one, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you. Okay, so thank you for your messages. So thank you, Sian, and thank you, Gerhild. Sorry I didn't really get a chance to talk to you much, Gerhild, but I'm glad you've got something out of it. That's really helpful, or nice to know rather. So yeah, if you've got some exercises to do, so please feel free to sort of go a bit deeper with those when you've got some time on your own. And has everybody got my email address? I'll just pop it in the chat. So if any questions sort of crop up as a result of doing those exercises, then please by all means get in touch. I'm more than happy to help if anybody's got any questions. about any of that. And like I said, please feel free to book a call in too. But I'm glad you've all got something out of it. And I run these workshops once a month, so I rotate through a few different topics. So please feel free to sort of keep an eye out for that. I will sort of email out when the next ones are due and the topics for them if you want to join. And also I will be sending a replay of this out if anybody wants to sort of have a refresh of it. So I will email that out to everybody. If the email doesn't pop up within a few days, then just check your junk, because sometimes it can appear in your junk mail as well. Okay, but yeah, thank you all. And if there's no other questions, we'll call that a day. So has anybody else got anything else they want to say before we go? Or is that answered everybody's questions? Or is everybody quite happy to just end it here?
I just wanted to say thank you, and it was lovely to meet everybody.
You're welcome, Amanda.
And good luck, everyone.
And to you. Good luck to you, Sam.
Thank you.
Lovely
Thank you.
Take care.
And thank you all for your participation.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, have a good evening. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.